Okay, well, hello everyone. My name is Julia.
And my name is Trevor.
So, we're here today to talk about an amazing animal that lives in our local rivers, creeks, and ponds. They're called frogs.
Why are frogs so amazing?
Well, I'm glad you asked because there's lots of reasons that frogs are amazing. And one of them is because they can live in water and on the land, which is pretty cool. They start their life in water, breathing with gills like fish, and then as they get older, they climb out of the water and start to breathe with lungs like we do. So as well as lungs, frogs can actually breathe through their skin, their actual skin. Wow. Hey Trevor, I've forgotten. What's that word we use to describe an animal that can live in and out of the water?
Um, is it amphibians?
Oh, well done. So, frogs are a type of amphibian. Also, frogs can tell us if a river or creek is dirty. If it's full of mud or there's litter or rubbish, like plastic bags or oil or soapy detergent, all that sort of stuff. What do we call, maybe Trevor, what's that word we use anyone at home as well. What's that word we use to describe dirty water? I think it starts with P.
Um, Pollution? Is that it?
That's the word I was thinking of. Thank you. Yes, yes, there. Frogs can't live in a river or a creek that's polluted because, um, you know, I guess remember, frogs breathe through their skin. So they take in air through their skin as well as any pollution in their surrounding environment. So, and of course, a lot of their case, water. So by frogs being somewhere, their mere presence, or if they're not somewhere like a river or creek or pond, we can tell how healthy or unpolluted a river or a creek is.
Right. Actually, do you know frogs have got an amazing life cycle as well?
Oh,
Have a look at these pictures. You see, they start off life as eggs in this little big bubbly mass. And then the eggs hatch after a while and they start swimming around as tadpoles. And as tadpoles, they swim around and eat all the algae in the water, which helps keep the water clean. And then after a while, they start to grow legs. First of all, they grow their back legs, and then they start to grow their front legs. And then next, their tail starts to shrink. It starts to vanish. And then they turn into a frog. But not only is their tail vanished, they've changed inside as well. So their gills have turned into lungs. When Julia was saying that they can breathe in the water when they're tadpoles, that's because they've got gills. But the gills have to turn into lungs so they can breathe out of the water when they're frogs. So once the tail's gone and they've got all four legs, they can crawl out of the pond and they become frogs.
wow. That's pretty amazing, Trevor. Wow. You seem to know a lot about this stuff. Do you know how many frog species there are in the world?
Oh, I think there's about 6,700 of them in the whole world.
Wow.
But unfortunately, a lot of them are in a lot of trouble. About a third of them are threatened now. And that's not really good.
What does threatened mean?
Oh, that means that they're close to being extinct and there won't be any more of that species around ever again.
Oh, gosh. Wow. It's so amazing to hear there's 6,700 different types or species of frogs, but it's so sad to hear that some of the types of frogs are struggling, that there's not many of them. Why is that, Trevor?
There's lots and lots of reasons why frogs are in trouble. One of them is all the places they like to live. We're building our houses on, or we're building farms on, or we're just clearing the land. So we're taking away their places to live. And
Hmm.
sometimes when we leave them little spots to live, those spots are too far apart. So frogs from different spots can't go and meet each other. And that's a bit of a problem. Another thing is all the things we put into the water, like pollution that you talked about earlier, and herbicides and pesticides that sometimes we spray in our farms and gardens. These are all things that aren't very good for the frogs. And you were saying that they breathe through their skin. Well, that's how some of these pollution and these pesticides and herbicides get into them and make them sick. They come in through their skin. So that's not really good for them. And particularly when we spray them around our creeks and ponds and that's really bad. Another reason is climate change. You know, with climate change, a lot of places are getting a lot drier, so there's no more water for them to swim in those places. So that's a bit of a problem. Another one that's a problem is there's a lot of introduced things that eat them. And one of them, some of the introduced fish. In Australia, we've got one called the mosquito fish. And that was brought in here to eat mosquito wrigglers. We brought them in here a long time ago. We thought, oh, it's a good idea, they'll eat the mosquito wrigglers. But unfortunately, the mosquito fish also eat lots of other things, including the eggs of the frogs, which means they don't get the hatch into tadpoles. They even bite the tadpoles as well, which isn't very nice. And there's other little problems around our cities, like cats and dogs roaming around our parks. They also eat frogs. But the really, really big one all around the world is a thing called chytrid fungus.
Oh, what's chytrid fungus?
Well, it's a disease, a bit like a virus spreading around.
Oh, you mean like the coronavirus?
Yeah, something like the coronavirus, but it's actually much, much worse than the coronavirus. And it makes them very, very sick. And not just a few frogs die, sometimes all the frogs in an area die when the chytrid fungus gets in.
Wow. And the chytrid fungus, is it just for frogs and amphibians? It doesn't affect humans or other animals?
No, only affects amphibians. So they're the only ones that get sick from it. So it doesn't affect us, but it affects them really badly. And those scientists don't actually know where it's come from. But they've been looking at it. They think it came about 30 years ago, but they're not sure exactly where it came from.
Oh, well, let's hope there's some more scientists out there that will continue to study it and find out more. What about frogs in Australia? How many species? Like we heard there's 6,700 in the world, I think it was. How many are in Australia?
Well, I think there are about 230 in Australia, and they're all over Australia in all parts. And they're all frogs. We don't actually have any true toads in Australia, except for one. There's one toad in Australia, but that didn't actually start off in Australia. It was brought here, a bit like the mosquito fish. That was actually brought here. It's called the cane toad, and it was brought here to eat beetles in the cane fields.
Oh.
But unfortunately, like the mosquito fish, it got out of the cane fields and it's gone everywhere, particularly in northern Australia. And it's causing a lot of problems. And it's not just for other frogs that's causing problems, it's causing problems for a lot of our native animals as well. And that's because the skin of the cane toad is very poisonous. And when some of our native animals eat it, they get sick and die.
Oh. Gee, oh, that's terrible. Wow. Not good at all.
So have we got many frogs around Melbourne, Julia?
Yeah, and that's what I wanted to talk to you guys about today. Yeah.
You want to tell us about them?
Yeah, well, I'll show everyone some photos, and also you can listen and you can hear what they sound like.
Wow, that'd be good. Well, actually, why do we need to hear what they sound like?
Well, frogs have their babies, which we talked about this before. They're called...
Tadpoles?
That's it. Tadpoles. That's right. Spot on. So, well, for the frogs to have tadpoles, the boy and girl frog need to get together. And sometimes they might not be able to find each other in a river or in a creek, or they're in the bush a bit, or in a big large lake, or even in a park. Plus, they want to make sure they can get together with the right species or the right type of frog. So the boy frog, or let's use the science term, the male, actually has a sound he makes to find the girl frog or female. So we call them frog calls, and each type or species of frog has a different frog call, which makes it easy for us humans to actually know which type of frog we have in a river, creek or pond.
Oh, that makes sense. Let's go through some of the most likely frogs that we'll find in the City of Yarra area.
Fantastic. Well, I've got my trusty Frog Census app, which is a really good thing to use to learn your frogs, and I've got the sounds up, and let's start with the eastern froglet, or the common eastern froglet. So yeah, that's the eastern froglet, which is our smallest frog. They are also our the most common one, I guess, that we have. Not that frogs are that common in Melbourne. So they're very small, and they're about half the size of my little finger. But they make a really loud call. So that's the first one. The second one I was going to show you is the spotted marsh frog. Listen to this one. So much smaller sound.
Very different.
Very different, isn't it, to the eastern froglet? They're a little bit bigger than the eastern froglet, but I've actually got some video that it's up on the screen now because I actually have a spotted marsh frog as a pet that we look after at Merri Creek Management Committee, and he's actually got little spots on the back, being called a spotted marsh frog, and you might actually be able to see he's got a red or yellow line down the back. So that's really distinctive, that little yellow-red line. And they like to live in wet grass or in marshy land close to a creek or a pond. Okay, the next one I'm going to play for you is called a southern brown tree frog. Now, this guy is actually on also, I guess, well, this first tree frog that I've talked about. So it's one of our local tree frogs. They are a lovely brown little colour, and they actually, when they lay their eggs, when they have their babies, they attach them to grasses and twigs, so they're sort of a bit higher off the water to keep them away from animals that might eat them. And these guys have sticky fingers and toes because they're really good climbers. So let's have a listen to this one. What do you think of that sound, Trevor?
Oh, that's another really different one. No wonder they have all these different calls, because it makes them easy to tell the difference.
Oh, it's true. Once you start to practice with them, you do get better at it, don't you? And they just sound so lovely. And I really like the tree frog. So I'm going to play you another tree frog now. This is called the Perrin's tree frog. That's even different again. So that's one of our larger tree frogs, and they're a real grey colour, and they have this really cool cross, like a cross in their eye, which if you ever get close enough is pretty interesting to see. So they're
creepy, actually.
So what was that, Trevor?
Creepy.
Creepy, yeah, actually their call sounds a bit creepy, doesn't it? And they're sometimes called the manicle or the crazy laughing frog, because it does sound a bit evil, doesn't it? A bit strange. But there's definitely not an evil frog. They're lovely. And actually, they seem to like areas, again, climbers, so they've got their sticky fingers and toes to climb. And they seem to like larger bodies of water, like bigger rivers, like the Yarra River, or big ponds or wetlands or lakes. And actually, we've heard them quite a lot in the Alphington wetlands recently, which is pretty exciting. And oh, sorry, Trevor.
One at my place once.
You've had one?
Yes, he crawled up and crawled into our watering can.
Oh, yes. They do like to do that. Yes, I have heard. They like to crawl up to the spout, don't they? The watering can. Yeah, because they
pour the water out then.
Yes, then you're trying to pour the water out of your watering can. What's going on? I can't get any water out. So, yes, they do get into watering cans and other things. And the last frog I was going to talk about was the pobblebonk frog. So this is one of our largest frogs, and these guys actually probably look the closest to a toad that we actually have. They're quite big as my fist, some of them get, and they like to bury in the ground. They bury themselves. And they've got dark, bumpy-like skin. And they like to burrow when the weather's dry to get to the water. And they're also known as a banjo frog because some people think their call sounds like a musician playing a banjo. Let's see what you think. Yeah.
Now, Julia, that sounds like a frog that we get at my place. I've got a pond at home, and at night we get to hear these frogs, and they go bonk, bonk, bonk. So we're able to sit there and listen to them at night in the summer. Wow. That must be the boy frog calling for a girl frog.
I think you're exactly right. That's exactly what's happening.
And once we got up in the morning and there was all this bubbly stuff all over the pond. And that was the frog's eggs. We'd found a girlfriend.
Oh, isn't that a nice story? I'm like, that's a really nice. Oh, wow. And all the eggs were floating on top of the water.
Yeah. And then about a week later, we had hundreds of tadpoles in the water.
Oh, wow. That is so exciting. Wow. I love that story. Wow. Well, we've got it coming to the end of our time together, but I thought a good way to finish is, Trevor, you might be able to tell us about what we can all do to look after our local frogs and make sure that they can have more tadpoles.
Okay. Well, there's a few things we can do. One, like me, you can build a pond in your backyard or in your front yard. And you just want to make sure a few things about the pond. One is that it's not all just one depth. You have a variety of depths in your pond, and you put a lot of plants in there because they like to have lots of plants in their ponds, and also somewhere for them to crawl out. If it's too steep on the sides, once the tadpoles turn, the frogs, they need something to crawl out onto. So you need a few things like that. You also need to put lots of plants around your pond and things like rocks and logs and everything because they like to have places to hide. So you want it to make it look as natural as possible, I think. Now, another thing you can do is not put any pollution into any of our local creeks. So things like washing your car with soapy water out in the street where it goes into the drain. And where does all the drains go to, Julia?
They all end up, I think, in the creek, don't they?
Yes, it all goes straight into the creek. So anything that gets tipped down our drains and gutters goes straight into our local creek. So that's not good. It's also not good to take frogs away from the wild. There's not enough around as it is. So if you want a frog in your backyard, the best thing to do is build a nice place for it to live, and they'll come and live there rather than you going and collecting them. And it's also illegal. And another good thing is not let your cats and dogs roam around, particularly at night when the frogs are calling, because they'll follow the call and might hunt them down. Another good thing you can do is pick up any litter in your local creek. Now, a good thing you might want to do is to organise a group, because it's more fun when you go out and do it in a group. And if you have a group, you can probably even borrow some equipment off Julia, because I think you've got some equipment, haven't you, Julia?
I do.
So she can help you with that. And you can always tell all your friends about how amazing frogs are, because they really are amazing. And if you want to, you can join the frog census. You can get the app from Melbourne Water, or there's another one from Museums Victoria. They're both really good apps, and you can record your frogs on them and help people find out where they all live. So there's just a few things you can do to help.
Wow, I think that's an excellent list, Trevor, and a nice way for us to finish, I think. I want to thank everyone for listening and watching, and we hope that you get outside soon to go and listen for your local frogs along your local river, creek or pond, and do some of those actions to help look after them. Bye, everyone.
Bye.